The story begins on a dark night when a bright alien spaceship crashes into a lake on Earth. After the crash, the two men emerge from the spacecraft and crawl out of the lake onto the shore. Kanan, one of them, quickly checks on his friend, who has sadly died from the crash. That night, as Kanan rests, he dreams of his wife and son as he prepares for battle. Waking up to the morning sunlight, Kanan notices the ship's beacon floating in the lake. He swims to it and uses it to find his location. After that he downloads information about Earth and its inhabitants, a process that proves to be painful for him. Once he finishes, he buries his crewmate and continues toward the forest. Armed with a powerful blaster, Kanan prepares to face the challenge that await him. Deeper in the woods, Kanan discovers the lifeless body of a whale next to a ruined and abandoned village. As he explores the village, he suddenly hears the sound of horses approaching and is quickly attacked. In the struggle, he loses his weapon in the river and is knocked unconscious. Kanan wakes up as a prisoner, captured by a Viking warrior named Wulfric. He is taken to a local village ruled by King Hrothgar, who is having a tense conversation with his daughter, Freya. They discuss her potential marriage to Wulfric, whom Hrothgar believes would make a good king with Freya by his side. However, Freya firmly declines, arguing that Wulfric would only become like his father, a tyrant and butcher. Hrothgar then presses her to choose someone else if she does not want Wulfric to be the king. Just then, Wulfric enters, prompting Freya to leave the hall. Wulfric then informs Hrothgar about the destruction of a nearby village, raising concern that Gunnar, the chieftain of that village, might blame them for the attack. Wulfric mentions he found a man in the village but does not know who he is. Hrothgar insists that they need to uncover the man's identity quickly to prevent a war from breaking out. Wulfric approaches Kanan to interrogate him, referring to him as the Outlander since he does not know his name. Kanan introduces himself, claiming he comes from an island in the north and is hunting a dragon. Wulfric, however, does not believe his story and brutally beats him before tying him up. Afterward, Wulfric goes to find Freya, asking her to tend to Kanan's injuries. Meanwhile, Kanan uses a hot iron rod to free himself just as Freya enters to treat his wounds. As she realizes he has freed himself, she shouts to alert others. In a sudden move, Kanan attacks her in an attempt to flee. At dusk, Hrothgar asks Wulfric about Kanan's progress, but Wulfric admits that Kanan refuses to cooperate. Hrothgar explains that he has sent men to reach Gunnar and insists they must clarify that they were not the ones who attacked his village. Wulfric hesitates, revealing his resentment toward Gunnar for having killed his father. Hrothgar reminds him that to be a king, he must learn to balance his emotions with logic, urging him to keep control of both his heart and mind, rather than relying solely on his sword and shield. Later that night, the village is suddenly attacked by an unseen, bright creature, and the villagers believe it to be an assault from Gunnar. They stay on high alert, watching for the enemy, while the creature picks off the men one by one, dragging their bodies beyond the wooden boundaries set by the Vikings. When Kanan sees the creature, he recognizes it as the morwen, the dragon he mentioned earlier. He attempts to chase the morwen beyond the wooden walls, but Wulfric's men quickly restrain him and tie him up. In that moment, Kanan experiences a flashback to his home planet, where he remembers losing someone very dear to him. Overwhelmed with grief, he cries heartbrokenly. In the morning, a small boy named Eric tries to feed Kanan, but one of Wulfric's men quickly kicks the food away and Kanan is brought before Hrothgar, who listens to his men debate about the morwen. Some believe it to be the work of forest spirits, while others think it is a sign of Lucifer due to the improper burial of their last king. Hrothgar interrupts the argument and asks Kanan to share what he knows about the dragon he is hunting. Kanan explains that the morwen attacks people, emits a smell of death, and lures victims with its lights before killing them. He admits that he inadvertently brought the creature to the village when it boarded his ship, causing their crash. Despite Kanan's explanation, Hrothgar is skeptical of his story. Realizing they plan to hunt the morwen, Kanan urges Hrothgar to let him join the team to hunt morwen. Agreeing to his request, the Vikings decide to take Kanan with them, tying his hands and giving him a horse. Before they leave, Freya approaches and throws a punch at him, while the villagers shout at him, calling him an outlander. As they venture into the woods, Wulfric spots several corpses and suggests forming expedition groups. However, Kanan believes they should stay together to hunt the morwen. Despite his suggestion, Hrothgar agrees with Wulfric and splits the group into pairs, with Wulfric teamed up with Kanan. As the pairs search the woods, some find horse heads while others discover various animal corpses. Kanan and Wulfric are by a riverbank when they hear a noise from a nearby cave. The entire team gathers and confronts the creature, which turns out to be a bear. Kanan helps the group defeat it, and Hrothgar spares Kanan's life, rewarding him with a sword. After their victory, the village celebrates, and Kanan, now dressed as a Viking, enters the hall. The villagers warmly welcome him as their guest rather than an outlander. While enjoying their meal, Freya overhears the story of how Kanan saved Hrothgar from the bear. As they share their meal, Kanan and Hrothgar discover a young boy hiding under the table. Kanan offers him some food, but Hrothgar realizes the boy is curious about the sword that killed the bear. Kanan promises to lend it to him in exchange for his name, and the boy introduces himself as Eric. Hrothgar then reveals that raiders killed Eric's parents a year ago, but he reassures Kanan that the village is looking after the boy and he will be fine. As part of the festivities, Wulfric engages in a shield game and challenges Kanan to join. In the game, people hold shields against their shoulders while Wulfric and Kanan stand on top. Wulfric runs across the shields, and Kanan tries to do the same. After a while, Wulfric performs a somersault and lands perfectly on a shield several feet away. Kanan manages to replicate the feat but falls when his shield breaks in half. Nevertheless, Wulfric praises him for his effort. After the celebration, Freya approaches Kanan and thanks him for saving her father's life. As they talk, Kanan tries to warn her about the morwen that has been killing their people, not the giant bear. Suddenly, Gunnar arrives and attacks the village. During the fierce fight, Gunnar finds Hrothgar and disarms him, shattering his shield. Just as he prepares to kill Hrothgar, Kanan intervenes in time to save him again. Eventually, Gunnar and his men retreat, unable to fight with the villagers. Outside their boundaries, Gunnar expresses his anger over the destruction of his village and not even leaving his family's bodies behind for him to grieve over. After the fierce battle, Eric cuts his long hair to imitate Kanan, while Freya tends to Kanan's wounds. As she works, he asks her about Gunnar's identity, curious about the man who has been part of their struggle. Freya explains that their conflict with Gunnar started when his tribe failed to join a raid against the Franks, who ambushed their warriors and killed King Helge, Wulfric's father. Meanwhile, Gunnar and his men plan to defeat Hrothgar and Wulfric. He instructs his men to prepare for an attack, anticipating that Wulfric will send troops into the trees before dawn. As a group ventures into the woods, one of Gunnar's men is killed by the morwen. Hearing the cries, Gunnar and his men investigate but, upon seeing the glowing morwen, they retreat to Hrothgar's village for help. Wulfric, noticing Gunnar's team rushing back, orders his men to attack, believing it to be a trick. After they kill several of Gunnar's men, all including Gunnar, Hrothgar, Wulfric, and Kanan, witness the morwen brutally attacking one of Gunnar's men, and Wulfric's men finally realize that it is not a bear. Gunnar, along with Hrothgar and Wulfric's team, gathers to discuss the threats they face. One member suggests leaving the village, but Freya argues against it, stating that the land is their home. Wulfric proposes hunting down the creature, but Kanan warns that they will not be able to kill it outright. Instead, he insists that their only chance is to trap it, emphasizing its strength and the fact that it is free in the fields. Wulfric, frustrated by Kanan's advice, becomes angry and argues that Kanan is not one of them and should not interfere. Hrothgar acknowledges Wulfric's point but ultimately supports Kanan's plan to trap the morwen. With Kanan's guidance, the combined team starts digging a large pit at the entrance point the following day. They create a trap for the creature using wood and whale oil. Once the hole is deep enough, they set up several posts and place shields on top of them. Afterward, they pour barrels of whale oil into the pit. By evening, the trap is ready, and the villagers gather to share their excitement and hope for successfully defending themselves against the morwen. Once everything is ready, Hrothgar approaches Kanan and offers him a position in the village, inviting him to become one of their own. Meanwhile, one of the victims from the previous night regains consciousness, surrounded by corpses, only to be killed again by the morwen. Later, in Kanan's hut, Freya is seen preparing a meal for him. As they share their food, Kanan reveals that his father urged him to stay, but Kanan expresses his desire to leave. Freya shares her father's hopes for Kanan to remain, but Kanan insists she does not understand what kind of man he truly is. In response, Freya encourages him to share his story, seeking to understand him better. Kanan reveals his story, saying that his men were no different from the Vikings, driven by a desire for land. When they spotted an island, they seized it without knowing who it belonged to. He explains that the island was home to millions of morwens, but in their quest for territory, they killed them with fire, leaving the rest haunted. He feels guilty for having contributed to their suffering. As part of his reward, Kanan was given a place for his family to live on that land. He cherished the time he spent with them until he was called away on a new mission. Before he leaves, he assures his family that they were safe since all the morwens had been eliminated. However, 3 weeks later, he learned that one morwen had survived and had killed everyone, including his wife and son. To this day, he believes he is to blame for their deaths. Freya tries to console him, suggesting that it was their destiny, but Kanan does not believe in destiny. In a meaningful gesture, Freya hands him the king's sword, a family heirloom passed down from her father, now entrusted to him. After their conversation, Kanan receives an arrow to prepare for the battle against the morwen. The group gets ready for the trap, now with Gunnar's assistance. The warriors open the village doors, and Wulfric and Kanan step outside as bait, waiting for the beast to emerge from the darkness. They cautiously approach the woods while the warriors remain hidden, ready to spring into action. As they draw closer, Kanan catches the scent of the morwen and devises a clever plan. He throws a flame into the woods, revealing that the morwen is lurking nearby. As the creature slowly approaches, the village priest steps forward, chanting for the devil, Lucifer, to leave, but he is instantly attacked and killed by the enormous beast. Wulfric and Kanan then dash toward the gate to capture the morwen, but in the chaos, Wulfric falls into the trap along with the creature. Kanan quickly helps him out, saving him from a dangerous fate. The warriors unleash fire arrows at the trap, resulting in a massive explosion. Initially believing they have destroyed the morwen, they are caught off guard when another morwen appears behind the women watching from a distance. Eric warns Freya about the monster lurking behind them, causing panic as the women rush outside. However, Freya stands her ground, resolute in her decision to confront the creature. Hearing the women's cries, all the soldiers rush to their aid, joined by Hrothgar. Suddenly, the first morwen emerges from the flames. Wulfric and Kanan decide to confront the creature together, but they quickly realize they are no match for its power. Gunnar steps in to help, but in an instant, the morwen executes him before fleeing into the shadows. Eric approaches Kanan and warns him about another morwen inside. As Kanan rushes to investigate, he discovers Hrothgar taking his last breaths in Freya's lap, with the morwen having already escaped. The next morning, Kanan notices the villagers leaving the settlement, and Eric approaches him, expressing the same concern. Kanan tells him that the village is no longer safe and insists that he should leave with the others. However, Eric is determined to stay by Kanan's side. Kanan tries to reason with him, explaining that once the danger passes, the village will be safe again, and everyone will return, including Eric. With a heavy heart, Kanan lifts Eric onto a cart, urging him to go for his safety and be with the villagers as they leave the village. Afterward, Kanan approaches Wulfric, who is feeling discouraged from the recent events and doubts his worthiness to lead. Kanan encourages him, emphasizing that they must unite to fight the morwen and create a safer village for their people. Together, they gather a small group of men to investigate the common well, where they discover blood. Although the plan seems reckless, it is their best chance to locate the morwen's hideout. Kanan asks Boromir, a skilled warrior, for stronger weapons made from better materials for their mission. As they prepare to head to the shore, Freya insists on joining them, driven by her desire for revenge against the morwen that destroyed her family. Kanan agrees, and the trio sets off to the lake where his ship crashed, hoping to salvage some metal for their fight. In the lake, Kanan dives into the water to grab the metal when he suddenly feels something lurking behind him. After retrieving a piece of metal, he emerges from the wreckage of his ship. He discovers a piece of clothing that belongs to Freya, prompting him to rush back to the surface. Once he breaks through the water, he finds Wulfric unconscious on the boat and realizes Freya is missing. They quickly return to the village, where Kanan hands the metal to Boromir for weapon preparation. In no time, Boromir crafts a sturdy weapon and presents it to Kanan. Later, Kanan, along with Wulfric and their men, descends into the common well, discovering an alternate passage. Once everyone arrives, they begin to investigate further, determined to uncover what lies ahead. Meanwhile, Freya comes to her senses, finding herself surrounded by a pile of dead bodies. The shocking sight fills her with panic, and she starts to scream in fear. As she tries to calm herself and think of a way to escape, she spots a small morwen feasting on one of the corpses. Frightened, she begins to shout again, which draws the creature's attention. This results in the morwen launching an attack on Freya. Back with Kanan and Wulfric's team, Wulfric accidentally kicks a small stone, catching the attention of the morwen that was about to attack Freya. The creature abandons Freya and turns its focus on the team. Soon, one of their members is attacked by the morwen, but they press on, only to find the creature feasting on the man it captured. Boromir bravely charges at the small morwen, sacrificing himself in the process. Though he loses his life, he manages to injure the creature's eyes, leaving it blind. After some time, Wulfric and Kanan successfully locate Freya and manage to kill the small morwen. This event awakens the giant morwen, which realizes its offspring is dead. As the team tries to escape the enormous creature, they find themselves at the edge of a waterfall. Wulfric stands guard to protect them while Kanan and Freya attempt to climb the slippery rock face. However, Wulfric is soon injured by the morwen, prompting Kanan to confront the creature. In an intense battle, Kanan fights the morwen until Freya joins him. Together, they manage to push the morwen over the edge of the cliff, sending it to its demise. Afterward, Freya and Kanan return to Wulfric, where he passes the kingship to Kynan just before taking his last breath. The duo climbs to the top of a cliff and spots villagers traveling below. They call out to Eric, signaling him to return to their village. Kynan tells Freya to wait for the others and shares a tender kiss with her before heading back to the lake. There, he says a heartfelt goodbye to his wife's submerged coffin. Unbeknownst to him, Freya watches from a distance as a spaceship approaches to take Kanan away. In a moment of determination, Kanan destroys the beacon, choosing to stay on Earth with Freya instead. He then goes back to the village, puts the kingship handed over by Wulfric, and pays his respects to the fallen Hrothgar and Wulfric with a Viking farewell. Finally, Kynan marries Freya and embraces Eric as his son, ready to build a new life together.